Today on Pro Church Daily, we're talking about the 5-part first impression test for church websites.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Pro Church Daily, the show where in 10 minutes or less you'll get your daily dose of tips and tactics to help your church share the message of Jesus while we navigate the biggest communication shift we've seen in the last 500 years. I'm your host, Alex Mills. I'm joined as always by the boss man, it's Brady Shearer. And today we're talking about the 5-part first impression test for church websites.
So, the number one goal of your church's website is to make a good, ideally great, first impression as consistently as possible. And so what we did was we put together this very extensive case study. We looked at more than 1,000 church websites and put them through, analyzed them according to this 5-part first impression test. And again, the goal of this case study, very simple. Answer the question: does this church's website make a good first impression? We had 1,008 total churches in the case study. 32 different countries were represented in there. We had every single state from America represented, every single province from Canada represented. And if you want to learn more about how we selected the churches, you can read the full case study at blog.nucleus.church. But for now, let's talk about the results.
All right.
To our dismay, 96% of the churches that we analyzed failed the 5-part first impression test. And truthfully, when we saw these results, at least my initial reaction was, okay, the test was too hard. You know, we set the bar too high. But as we parsed through the data even more, we found that, sure, 96% of churches failed the first impression test. But I think even more importantly, 8 out of every 10 churches, more than 8 out of every 10, in fact, failed more than one part of the test. And there was only 5 parts. So that's a 60% at most for 8 out of every 10 churches. Less than 20% only failed one part. So even if, for instance, you think, okay, I would have done this test a little differently, I think that part's unfair, or that part's too arbitrary or subjective, even if you removed one part from the 5-part test, you've still got more than 8 out of every 10 churches. And really, when we came to deciding what should be a part of this test, we tried to make it very baseline, very foundational. Like, your website didn't need to be original. It didn't need to have like world-class design. It didn't need to be expensive. It didn't need to be, out of this world. It just needed to hit some basic check boxes. 5, in fact. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into each of the 5 parts. The first part was your church's website should have a primary focal point. And 76% of the church websites we looked at lacked this fundamental design property. A primary focal point is very simple. When you land on a website, your eye should be drawn to a single location. So within the Nucleus formula, and the Nucleus framework rather, it's this big main headline. It fills the entire screen. If you decide to remove the headline, it would be the main featured card with the image and the huge call to action. This is where your eye is drawn. We found with so many churches' websites, they would try to stuff their homepage with, okay, an image here, call to action here, 3 more slides here. If you go to the blog.nucleus.church, and look at this case study, we show an example, and we can show it on the screen here as well. Here's what a primary focal point should look like in the Nucleus framework, and here's what one does not look like. And then in this example on the blog, if you're listening, head over there. I think there was 3 different call to action buttons, plus a big hero image, and then 4 different other images underneath. And that was before I even began scrolling. And again, I don't even fault these churches. They're trying to we need to show as many great things as possible. But when we overwhelm people with choices, it's so much easier to just say, I don't need to make a choice at all, rather than try to parse through all the information. So you need to have a primary focal point.
Sorry to interrupt you. And sliders didn't quite make that cut because, sure, if you had a full-width, full-page slider, you would think, oh, that's a primary focal point. But before you know it, 2 seconds later, it's swiping away to another primary focal point. So there were multiple focal points, and it wasn't quite accomplishing the goal that a primary focal point should. So if you had a slider as your primary focal point, it didn't make the cut.
Google tells us that websites with low visual complexity are most preferred by users. And that's why you need this one primary focal point. First impressions are happening in 0.05 seconds. You only have about 10 seconds before a user's deciding to click that back button or stay on your site. And to force them to parse through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things, that's just making their job way too difficult. You need to give them just one main thing, because that's the best way to keep them based on the data that we have on scale from reputable companies like Google and Stanford. And so that's why we need primary focal points. That's part 1. Part number 2 is the responsive design. 40% of church websites we looked at were not responsive. And this is important because in 2017, worldwide mobile traffic accounted for more than 52% of all traffic on the internet. So that means that more than 1 in 2. The majority of internet traffic is coming now from mobile devices. And 4 out of every 10 church websites we looked at in this group of 1,008 from 32 different countries weren't mobile responsive. So you'd hit it on your phone and you'd be like, oh my. And basically when that happens is you're just sacrificing the majority of your internet traffic.
This number surprised me because a few years ago, like mobile responsiveness was kind of like a new thing and wasn't quite industry standard. But now it feels to me like mobile responsiveness is just like a given.
Sure.
Websites should almost be built mobile first nowadays. And so responsiveness isn't really even a selling point for website builders anymore. It's kind of just a given. So I was wondering, like, 4 out of every 10, like around 40% of church websites are not responsive. What are we using to build our websites? Because it feels like it's industry standard to me at this point. How is your website not responsive?
I think what we found in this case study was that it's easy to live in an echo chamber of church communicators online. And most people in Pro Church Nation, if we only looked at Pro Church Nation websites, I don't think we get 4 out of 10. The thing is, a lot of church websites haven't been updated in 5 to 10 years. They set them up once and just assumed, as long as I update it to make sure Easter and Christmas show up, I'm good. Yeah. And we found that again and again. And it's, like I said, it's easy to just think it's fine because like yours is fine and the churches that you hang out with and the group you run in is fine, but that may not be representative of churches on a whole.
Right.
Part 3, 38% of church websites failed the speed test. We used the Pingdom website speed test for this. You had to get a score of 80 or above B, letter grade or above. If your website loads in 3 seconds instead of 2 times as many people are going to abandon your site because of low speed times, or high speed times rather. And that's going to affect your Google and search engine result rankings as well. So your website needs to be fast.
Right.
Part 4, this one is close and dear to my heart.
Yes.
32% of church websites contained stock photos of people's faces. And this may not be something that most people listening would think would be such a big deal. It's like, who cares if I use stock photos of people's faces? Just imagine this for a second. Imagine you bought a ring online.
Okay.
So let's say you're on Etsy. Etsy is like the online market for handmade items, and they sell a lot of rings. Let's say you bought one there, and there was this big product photo, and you saw this beautiful, amazing ring. You buy the ring, it comes to your house, you open up the envelope, it comes in, and the ring doesn't look anything like the picture. You would be furious.
Yeah.
That would be lunacy. They completely misrepresented their product. Churches are different. We're not selling a product that you can buy, but our product is existential matters of the heart.
Yeah.
Hope, community, purpose. Best way to represent those is people, because that's the heart. We are the body of Christ. That's the best representation that we have. And so if you are putting up a representation that is not your church, it's disingenuous, it's deceptive, it's a lie, and it might not hurt your first impression immediately, unless it's clearly a stock photo and sometimes you can see right through them.
Oh, yeah.
But it will ruin your first impression when someone walks through your building's doors and sees, okay, this church doesn't look anything like their website did.
Exactly.
Do not use stock photos of people's faces.
Maybe we should talk about this more in a future episode.
I think you are right. I will write that down and make note of it.
Okay.
Final part of the 5-part first impression test is readily accessible new visitor information. 62% of church websites do not have easy to find new visitor information. When it came to this case study, it took a team of about 10 to do it because there's so many websites. What was cool was we were visiting these websites as new visitors because we had never been to these websites before, and it was so difficult on so many of them to find new visitor info. I'd see things about their potluck and their men's retreat and their sermon series, and I wouldn't find anything about me. Like, I just want to know what your church believes or when you meet. Where do you meet? Yeah. What should I expect? And just imagine, like, if you're a pastor or a church leader, imagine someone walking through your doors on a Sunday and you know they're a new visitor because 80% plus churches are 250 or less. You probably know when a new family or new visitor comes through. Yeah. And then imagine they got completely ignored. No one talked to them. No one acknowledged them. And a whole Sunday went by. They came in through the doors. They left through the doors. Not a single person. That would be a travesty. Thing is, your first impression isn't happening in service on Sunday anymore, or in your parking lot. It's happening on your website. More than half of church websites are doing that exact thing digitally that they would never do or would at least grieve over happening in their own services.
Yeah. And this one's the most important to me personally as a pastor and just as somebody who works in a church. People are visiting your website as first-time visitors and they're asking questions. They want to know what you're like, who you are, what you believe, where you meet, when you meet, what to expect. These are the questions they're asking, and we know that. And so we need to preemptively answer these questions and have that information, prioritize that information on our websites, because that's who our websites are for. They're not for our congregation. Our congregation will use our websites, but it's not primarily for them. It's for first-time visitors.
That'll do it for today's episode of Pro Church Daily. If you want to see the full case study, blog.nucleus.church is where to find it. All the results, you can download the entire case study in a PDF form and see every single website that was included. Blog.nucleus.church. Talk to you tomorrow.
Hey, thanks for watching today's episode of Pro Church Daily. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. We post new videos every day. If you subscribe, you won't miss any.
And if you like this one, it'd mean the world to us if you give it a thumbs up.
Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.